Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Muller, and I'm the director of Peters Valley School of Craft here in Layton, New Jersey. We're in the ancestral lands of the Munsee, Lenni, Lenape people here in beautiful northern New Jersey. And tonight, we're so excited to have Donald Clark and Chotsani Elaine Dean here with us. This program is set up as a webinar format. So our guests do not have control over their video or audio for the lecture, but you are certainly able to put questions and comments into the Q&A. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Zoom, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll have a little menu there and you can put questions. We're going to have a presentation from our guests, and they have asked that if you have questions, just pop them in and then I will read them off and we'll talk about them and answer them as we go. Tonight, we're just so grateful to have Donald and Chotsani with us, and we thank Schiffer Publishing, specifically Schiffer Craft, the publisher of their new book called Contemporary Black American Ceramic Artists. This is a really important topic for all the amazing, talented artists that we have. And Schiffer Craft publishes many, many books on the subjects of craft in different mediums, so look them up. So we're going to start with Chotsani Elaine Dean. Chotsani, a fellow Connecticut girl. She is an artist and assistant professor of ceramics at the University of Minnesota and received her BFA in ceramics from Hartford Art School and her Master's of Fine Arts degree from Sam Fox School of Art at Washington University in St. Louis. She's been in residence at the John Michael Kohler Artist Residency, a recipient of a Fulbright Scholar Teaching and Research Grant in India. Dean was also the inaugural M.J. Do Good resident at Red Lodge Clay Center in Montana, held the position of studio manager at Wesleyan Potters in Middletown, Connecticut, and is the recipient of a Connecticut Arts Grant. Chotsani has lectured and exhibited widely in solo and group exhibitions and has taught at institutions including Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi, India, University of Connecticut, Connecticut College, and Hartford Art School. So accomplished. Welcome, Chotsani. And
Thank
then
you.
You're welcome. We have Donald Clark, who I think I've known you for like 25 years. Long time.
More.
I know, it's crazy.
More.
So Donald is a core figure in the American ceramic arts movement development over the past 40 years. Began collecting ceramics in the 1970s. He continued to build his collection based on relationships during his over 30 years of experience as a partner at Pinch Pottery and Farron Gallery. He's served as research manager for the Marks Project, an online researchable database documenting the marks of makers working in America from 1946 to the present. His collection illuminates the rise of studio pottery movement. Selections have been exhibited at the Mitchell and Donald Damore Museum of Fine Arts in Springfield, Massachusetts. Clark has written for Ceramics Monthly and Studio Potter. He's also the author of Making a Living in Crafts, a very, very important book that was written probably 15, 20 years ago.
2006.
2006, okay. And also a very accomplished assemblage artist, right? Of your own right. So,
How I spend my time.
Just beautiful. I'm so honored to have you both here. And I'm just going to let you take it away and just remind everyone that you can put questions in the Q&A, and that Rachel, you can't see her, but she's like hosting and managing all of this and will help me if we run into any technical difficulties. So welcome, Chotsani and Tom.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks.
joining us.
I'm a Connecticut man, so we're all Connecticut. So what you see here is the cover of our book. The hand you see is Morel Doucet, who's holding a piece of his work. Morel's work as one would learn going through the book, is very much about what we're doing to the environment, and particularly how climate change is affecting people of color. Morel is in Miami, where that's a serious issue. To the right is the cover of the catalog that Northern Clay Center published for an event launching the book and an exhibition of work by the makers in the book. That exhibition has traveled to Sacramento and is about to open at Crocker Art Museum. What you see here is a piece by Paul S. Briggs that is from his series where he was struggling with the amount of recidivism that occurs among particularly young Black men. And there were a whole series of these pieces that, when they were first shown, were on a wall in a row, sort of reminiscent of cells, and a row of cells.
The name of the series, the Cell series. In this
And Paul's
particular,
about to go to Alfred to join the faculty there.
yeah.
And if you're in Sacramento, you can see the show from May 10th to August.
So what we wanted to do was include two really important quotes that are at the start of the book that gives a little bit of context as to how the book begins and where the book moves into in two different chapters. We took the time to look to the past to help really set up the context and the diversity of artists who are living that make up a majority of the book. And one person we both really admire and lands us like right in the middle of the time span we look at in the past is Doyle Lane. And I will let Donald tell his Doyle Lane story.
Well, it's a Doyle Lane pot that caused this book to come to be. I was visiting a friend on Deer Isle in Maine, who John Bullard, who for over 30 years was the curator of the New Orleans Art Museum. When he retired, collecting pots became his full-time job. And he's filled his New Orleans house, and he's filling the house on Deer Isle. And I was there one day, and John used to likes to share, look at the new pot I got. So he picked up this, not that one, but picked up a Doyle Lane pot and said, look, I just got this Doyle Lane. And went on to tell me Doyle Lane had been born in New Orleans, moved to California, to LA, where he spent the majority of his life. I had done some research about Doyle Lane for the Marx Project, and it was nearly impossible to find anything about him. At this point, Doyle Lane is all over the internet. He's pretty easy to find. But 3 years ago when we were doing this, not so. He was a glaze master, a mid-century potter who struggled to get shops and galleries to show his work. And he was quite clear that it was because he was a Black man. In the bigger scheme of things, there's very little known about him.
And so I think
it's a very quiet, private life.
And so I think that's why it's important here that I'll read James Baldwin's quote out loud, which gives a greater significance to the book project. History, as nearly no one seems to know, is not merely something to be read. And it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways, and history is literally present in all that we do. It could scarcely be otherwise, since it is to history that we owe our frames of reference, our identities, and our aspirations. And I think what's important about what James Baldwin does here is use the word our. Although we'll see in some of the artists will be showing that there are very singular identities and points of departure, and that brought them to clay, where they take clay. This really adds to the full canon of the tradition and history and contemporary position of ceramics. And I'll let Donald take on Roberta Smith.
Well, we included the Roberta Smith quote from the Times because she was basically stating more eloquently what I just said, that it was very difficult to find Black artists other than the very top, Maya Angelou, Bill T. Jones, the people in that at that level of their careers. But then there was a gap. Roberta is responding to the fact that that was changing radically in the 2010s, which leads up to the time we were putting this book together.
Oh, sorry. So we wanted to make sure you saw us together. Because one thing about this book that we write about in the catalog essay for Northern Clay Center that really didn't hit us, I think, until we first saw each other in Middletown in December 2021, Donald?
The book was entirely written and the
Remotely.
manuscript had gone, well, the manuscript had gone to Schiffer and we'd never met face to face.
Right. And we've
That
always
we knew about.
paths.
We'd been in the same place 3 times, but we didn't know one another.
Yeah.
So we did meet in Middletown
And then
over lunch.
Yep. Then
And
at
then
Red Rose. Right.
and then we went to Minnesota. I went to Minneapolis.
Oh, then I came to Springfield.
You came to Springfield where we had a Red Rose
Right.
lunch.
So this was our third. So we're making up for our 3 missed. We are well beyond our 3.
We should get Red Rose to underwrite our adventures. So this is in Minneapolis after the incredible weekend at Northern Clay.
Yeah. So now we'll get into it. Jim McDowell. This really is contemporary. You know, when we think about the Hear Me Now exhibition at Metropolitan Museum of Art, Jim's been working in the tradition of face jugs pretty much all his career, so much so that his address is the Black Potter. Donald, if you want to share the editing question Sandra had.
Oh, yes. When we were doing this, Sandra, our editor, was concerned that we were saying the Black Potter. And his name was there, Jim McDowell, the Black Potter. And she said, "Are you sure you want to say that?" And in fact, he's very upfront about that. He is the Black Potter. And he's one of the few, there are a number of people doing face jugs now. The majority of them, the Metters family, for instance, are all white people. He's a Black man carrying on the tradition. And much like David,
Sorry,
much
Donald.
like David Drake, he is adding words to his pot. And his pots are very topical and political. This is Trayvon Martin's pot.
Yep.
Now, Chotsani, roll us along.
Sorry. Oh, we have who has become a dear friend, Lydia Thompson, you know, just through this project. And we just collaborated on an exhibition at NCECA, this past NCECA. And Lydia's in North Carolina. We always lament that I was in South Carolina for 5 years, and just the way it is with teaching, I never got up there to connect with her. But she has a long career, was in graduate school at the same time as Paul Briggs. So she's been in it a long time. And her work really deals with migration, the experience of the family, the home, and change. And Donald is really fascinated with the mechanism that is on the bottom of these houses. We would talk at great length, him explaining to me, tell me the name. They are the wheels on the bottom. They're African. Do you remember, Donald?
Well, and Lydia talks about how migration is something that the Black community has had to deal with, and that sometimes you move because you choose to, and sometimes you are moved. And an earlier group of these house sculptures were on pallets, which meant that you had no control over moving. These are on wheels, so that you do have some control over the movement. And in the earlier slide of hers, can we go back one? Because what it shows is two ranges of her work. You'll see a little house in the lower right, but then these two major figures that she has worked on that are based on treadles from looms that are used in West Africa. Thank you.
Yes, it's the heddle pulleys.
Heddles, yes.
That she's pulling from West African architecture and structures. And as you're moving, you know, what she's talking about is how community is generated in those shifts as well, which is something she and I talk a lot about, being in two sort of different generations of clay, and kind of looking back and seeing how for a long time we were kind of moving along alone together through it, but now we have a friendship now, you know, and would things have been different had we known each other before, or that sense of community, but we don't really lament on it. We take full advantage of how that migration, this project has brought us together, which has been really lovely.
Well, and she also talks about how her work is about her own migration through life, as we all migrate through life. And here's the boys, Kyle and Kelly Phelps, who, as you can see, work side by side. They collaborate on every piece they make. Their work is referencing having grown up in the Midwest in a factory town, and that's where people worked. They talk about the whistle blowing at the beginning and the end of the day. Now all of the well, not in the flag one, but in the majority of their work, they set them in an environment like a Santos, and all of the structural stuff comes from the factories that are closed and the buildings are disintegrating. So the what's going on here is pretty obvious.
Yeah, you know, they're addressing the fact that they didn't grow up in the civil rights movement, but they're clearly invoking, you know, the civil rights movement and how it didn't affect them, in the sense of what they're still continuing to experience, as they note, with police brutality. Kind of this helplessness of watching it happen and unfold now on TV, and more instantly, even in the past, when there were cameras capturing some of the civil rights movement on television, but now this kind of excessive information coming in. It seems like it's happening like all, I mean, it's happening all the time, but it's even more amplified as it comes through your form. And I think that's what James Baldwin is getting at. And art having the ability, especially here in ceramic form, to really capture what's happening at the present, which is becoming history. Also, they use a lot of alternative surface treatments in their work, and they don't apologize for that. They don't try to cover that up. Some is glazing, some is oil paint, and they talk a little bit. Well, I listened to a talk that they gave. If you remember, Donald, we were both at it at Clay Art Center, right? And they talked about their painting background and how that informs how they resolve the surfaces of their works.
And you can tell from the detail on the right, their ability to imbue their work with the anger and the desperation of the characters that they show.
And next, it's just fitting that Bobby Scroggins is next because he was their professor.
Can I interrupt real quick? There's a question about what is the scale of the work of Kyle and Kelly Phelps? And I would say
probably not more than 15 by 30.
And it
we could,
varies.
but we could look and see.
And it's also in the book.
I'm looking. Here's one that's 45 by 31 by 9.
28 by 10.
Another one is 38 by 20 by 8. That help?
thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
And the one you're looking at, Unrest, is 24 by 48 by 4.
And that's all inches.
And there's Mr. Scroggins. When we were searching for people to put in this book, sometimes one person led to another person. In this case, Bobby Scroggins said, you really should talk to Kelly and Kyle. So that's how Kelly and Kyle ended up in this book.
Yeah, and Bobby Scroggins is a wonderful, wonderful educator and artist. He started very, very young. And that's one thing you'll see in his profile, that this has been something he's been doing all his life. And it was such a joy to meet him and watch him interact with all the other artists at the opening. He really is our senior member of the group, along with David McDonald, and he also knows Paul Andrew Wandless, and you know, it's not often that you talk to other people and Bobby Scroggins' name comes up quite a bit, and he was one of the original members of the Color Network, which has also evolved and changed over time, but that's how far back Bobby Scroggins goes.
And he was an early supporter of this project and has continued to be a supporter to this day.
Yeah, he always checks in. He's really interested in supporting younger artists with opportunities and bringing people together. That's really a wonderful quality about Bobby's work, and a lot of storytelling. So these are just two examples of one type of work, but there are other pieces that have really rich stories to them that are also included in his profile in the book. And next we have Ashlyn Pope, one of our younger artists in the group. Ashlyn also was able to come to town along with Sharon Norwood, and they gave a presentation, and that really focused on how both of them used clay as a metaphor for the body, and more specifically the Black body in those experiences. Ashlyn grew up in New Jersey, but her family is from South Carolina, and she is part of the Gullah Geechee people down there. And the only way you can learn basket making, because I'm friends with a sweetgrass basket maker, is from someone in your family, and it has to be on your maternal side. So that was something Ashlyn missed out on, but she didn't let that stop her from connecting to her culture. So you see here, she's using the clay to express the sweetgrass and connect with her culture. And what's really wonderful is she was in Lawrence, Kansas, also by way of Kennesaw, Georgia, and was a student of Keith Wallace Smith, who's also in the book. But she recently, as of last year, she accepted a position at Coastal Carolina. So she is in Myrtle Beach. So she's now literally bridged the physical distance and is in the place where her culture and identity originates and still continues.
Could we just say something about a little bit more? Gullah baskets are coiled from bound groups of sweetgrass. What Ashlyn has done is make those coils from thin coils of clay that she's then binding together and using on the outside of her pieces.
And
She's really referencing that tradition.
The other thing you'll note is, and that's with some other works in the series and in her profile, is that the actual sweetgrass elements are holding up the vessel. In a way, she's, as she writes here, standing in the culture. She's using the actual material to support the vessel that she's often referencing, and and using as a metaphor for the Black body.
And she chose very carefully a color of clay that matched her skin. And in the image of her, you can see that very clearly. She's holding a pot that is the color of her arm. That apparently was a very important consideration. Well, and look who's here.
Leslie T. Brown.
What are we going to say about this man? Let's look at, here we go. The object on the right is huge. The object on the left is obviously not. Wesley Brown makes his work by tossing clay onto textured fabric on the floor and then peeling it away and using it to build his pieces, which are all done with these slabs and then assembled. And what you can't see here, but you can see in the book, is the amazing way he joins the pieces, like the arm of the chair and how it's pretty incredible work.
Yeah, and what's nice is the play between sculptural work and utilitarian. And keeping up with Wesley is exhausting. He does not let a blade of grass grow under his feet. He is extremely prolific. And what's wonderful to watch, I see when he posts on Instagram, he isn't just working abstractly and expressive, he is technical, he is a craftsman, and he makes spouts that pour. He is concerned with the way his teapots function, with the way his cups will interact with people. So when we see him talking about physicality and dynamism, it's not at the expense of how his his work that doesn't immediately look functional actually embodies that function. Which I think we see in these last words, memorializing struggle, trial, and triumph. What might appear to be there isn't necessarily the whole. You have to use it, you have to experience it. And you pour those things, you watch it, and those spouts pour beautifully on those teapots. Donald's favorite couple, Rosa and Winton.
So we have, when we were putting this book together, it was important to cover as many conceptual bases as we could, young, sort of mid-career emerging,
Well
old
established.
master people. And then this came up. We have two collaborative couples, the Phelps, who you just saw, who are twins and do all their work together. Rosa and Winton, a man and, have been married for many, many years. And they also, not necessarily side by side, but work on together on every piece they make. And depending on the piece, it might be coil built by Rosa or thrown by Winton. It might be, incised by Rosa or by Winton, or the surface decorated with, they do these are real functional potters. They make a living selling functional pots. And every year they make a new major piece from which they draw the components, so to speak, for their line that they will make that year. And that inspiration can come from shotgun houses appear on a number of their pieces. The ancestors, which you're seeing in this bowl, and this bowl was a major piece. And the words tell you, I trust Winton with my ideas to show how and why women became head of household when the men were sold away.
Yeah, and their profile talked about how they came to clay, which is a really cute and wonderful story.
Shall we say a couple words about that?
Now we're gonna save that, folks. It's good. No, can't give it away.
Rosa was a nurse.
Oh, you're giving it away.
Pardon?
You're giving it away.
Okay.
We have to tease them.
Okay, Rosa was a nurse. We'll not say anymore.
That's good. Rosa was the nurse. That's a good t-shirt. And we have Earlene Green, who is in Texas.
And Earlene's work, in the book, we show two different things. These bottles, jars. She's done a great deal of research on the Wilson pottery, which is believed to be the first Black-owned business in Texas.
Yeah.
And she's sat with their descendants. She's been to the site of the pottery, and she's done a series of her work inspired by the work. And their logo was H. Wilson and Company, and she has added a legacy revisited to her tacking. Do we have another picture of her work?
No.
Okay.
And we move on to Christina Baptiste, who's in the Pacific Northwest in Tacoma, Washington, who also came to clay later in life and from another career, and balances the two. She's a librarian, and you see here, this is that story when she took a community class and started working with clay, and got the clay bug, which I'm sure everyone on this webinar has. And she also works between two different bodies of work that does have some political associations and brings attention to the Black experience. But on the other hand, she's also very concerned with making work that is specifically for the home, very minimal in design, and elegant. And she's very, very intentional about that. And that's pretty much a consistent thread through the work. She was also able to come out for the exhibition and sit on a panel and talk about that relationship and that dynamic of she feels pulled in to say something in her work that responds to a contemporary event or something that impacts her and her community. But also where she's able to create things for the home and touch people with her work in a much different way. So it was really, really wonderful to have her on that panel and bring that sort of perspective and way of working with clay to the group, to the panel.
Before she goes away, we might point out that the reality is it's not easy to make a living as a potter or a basket maker, whatever. Many of the people in the book have other careers. Many of them are academics. Others, like Christine, she's a research librarian in Seattle. We have a man coming up, I think, who works in a steel factory and is inspired by what he sees there when he's working on the surfaces of his pots.
We don't have, but that is Stephen Phillips, who's in the book, but we don't have him in this lineup.
We don't have him.
Oh, not this time. We shook it up a little bit. We have Justin.
We have Justin.
No vowels, Justin.
So Justin Coleman is a perfect embodiment of a Black man. And his work, notice his sneakers down there, they're important as we go forward. And this wheel, which is a rim. And he talks about how he's taking something low and making it high by making the rim an art piece. And these two pieces, the stamping, the patterning, which is particularly clear on the right, is from a sneaker, from the sole of a sneaker, which is another major status symbol for young Black men. I'm aware of a man in my world who probably has 35 pair of sneakers still in their boxes, and he chooses which one to. So the piece on the left is a we don't say recycled anymore. We say
ready-made piece.
A ready-made piece that he has. And so what he does is he stamps his shoes, the soles on a piece of paper. He then photographs that, transfers it to ceramic decal, and then applies them to the pieces. And clearly the one on the left is referencing, blue and white historic.
But takes us through time as that blue and white had its relationship to wealth. What he's doing here on the surface is incorporating Louis Vuitton, but also taking what Louis Vuitton and the boombox represent and how it's connected to hip hop, but he also has George Clinton, Parliament funk, spaceship kind of structure that they had, the funkadelic, is also mixed in there. So he's sort of spanning generations and almost doing a little bit of a timeline of the fashion and symbols that permeate hip hop and rap, all the way again to the sneakers. And as he says, creating a generational moment in Black culture.
I have a couple of questions here from Yinka or Afidia. So if we could take a minute. They say, we do need books about Black makers working in clay written by Black writers. So where are they? Why did a white man recognize the need to call attention to Black makers working in clay?
That for me or
Yeah, I guess, or for both of you. I mean,
Well,
it's an interesting question.
I spent my life, my major part of my career as a gallerist, looking at pots, um, making aesthetic decisions about pots, deciding also if in the shop, in the, you know, in Pinch Pottery, could we sell that pot? So I looked at thousands of pieces of ceramic. I've purchased hundreds. It was Doyle Lane in that experience I explained earlier that made me think somebody has to do this. And I know pots, and I know that process. So why not me as a to spur this on? And then Chotsani joined me, and you are seeing the results of that. I don't know why a Black person didn't do it, but I know why. What led me to do it was all those years of experiencing potters and knowing makers. In fact, in all the years of our gallery, one, Kevin Snipes, to the best of my knowledge, is the only Black person whose work we ever showed. You don't always know the color of a person when you buy their work, unless you buy it face to face. But I think Kevin is the only one. And it's not, you know, Leslie and I shopped viciously, aggressively, at every craft fair, wholesale market imaginable. And 30 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were actively doing that, they just weren't there. Now they are. David McDonald, whose picture you're seeing now, in the last 2 months has been in 2 major craft fair events, one in New Jersey and one in Massachusetts. Did we ever see his work? Don't think so. And
Well,
there could be any number of reasons for that. And that's another whole evening's conversation, but go, Chotsani.
Yeah, there's a reason I mentioned Wesleyan Potters. That's one of the first places I worked coming out of graduate school as the studio manager there. And I was fortunate enough to be there for a lot of the visiting artists that came through, and I did meet David McDonald, but it was very fleeting. My name is also on the book as co-author, so I stepped away from my own practice, balanced it with my teaching, where, you know, I'm also pouring into students in my class, mentoring. So I think when we think about the amount of labor Black people take on, you know, there's opportunities that come, and I saw this and I added that on to my plate because I knew how important that was. But no one really ever encouraged me, or it never even dawned on me that I could pursue writing or be an author. And I saw this opportunity and did that. I have a writing practice, but I think it's just about timing and opportunity. And this was a chance to bring together 2 different perspectives when we think about what we're doing here and broadening the canon. If you're going to have relationship within that reconciliation, you have to understand one another. So I think that's what makes this project for me unique, is what Donald brought and what I brought together and what can go forward. And there's absolutely no reason anyone else can't take this forward. I'm sure Schiffer would be happy to take that on. And it's a tremendous amount of work. So it's open. Anyone can write about it, just as much as there are things in my work that are influenced from cultures that are outside of mine, but I find ways going through history to see how it comes back into mine. I want to have permission to access those things, just as I went to India and steeped myself in research of tea plantations, kind of doing comparative research into cotton plantations that I don't have access to, in the sense that they don't exist as they did before, but they do in India. So I don't want to put any kind of restraints on what I'm able to access for anyone else, as I wouldn't want them to do for me. So this was very much a joint project. I also don't have an answer for that, except my name is on the book as co-author.
Thank you for answering that. And Yinka has a lot of questions. Some of the comments I'm not quite understanding.
We can move on. We'll move on to David McDonald.
Okay, and then we can hold questions to the end.
Well, David McDonald is the end, I think.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then we can talk a little bit more. So Yinka, hold on, and we'll get back to you. Okay.
So just as talking with David, we both wanted to get back and get a little more out of David in terms of his teaching. So we were very fortunate to be able to have a phone conversation with him to talk a little bit more about his experience as a professor and an educator. And we were able to get some really great stories of how he moved through undergrad and into graduate school, and how he started out as an athlete and the world that clay opened up for him. And he had just come off of receiving the teaching award at NCECA, I think, when we talked to him. Is that right, Donald? Not
Yes.
too long before that. And what I'll do is
And what you're seeing here,
I'm gonna see where
he developed this incredible way of carving into the surface of his pieces. And the patterns he's using are ones that he saw in fabric, in clothing, and painted on the exterior walls of houses in West Africa, particularly Nigeria, and among the Yoruba.
So when we always include David McDonald. So what I'll do is I'll read the last and sort of most powerful quote. I don't think it's just to young people. I think it's a reminder to us all, where he says his advice to young people is that you shouldn't be doing this stuff with the hope and expectation that you will one day become famous. If that is your primary goal, you will try to figure out what shortcuts you can take to be famous, and you will compromise yourself in the process. Do it because you love it, and to do anything else is inconceivable. It should never be about what you need to know to be important or famous. The more important thing is what you have to do to tap into what is uniquely important to you. Once you find this out, then you have made it. Once you find it, just follow that. Unfortunately, it is not always easy.
That would, yeah. That long quote is an example of how we put this book together. Neither of us were interested in interpreting people's work and saying what their work was about. The whole goal was to get the person to talk about their work and why they make it, where the inspiration comes from. And basically, they wrote the book. We built it around their words. There obviously are words in there that we have written, but they are often connectors and things that just explain things generally, but not about David McDonald's work. David McDonald told us why those patterns and where he got those patterns. We didn't decide.
Thank you.
And they were very instrumental in choosing the images. And in most cases, there was conversation, obviously.
And they were the last people to review their profile before it was sent to Schiffer. They had the last say, obviously before just copywriting, type things, nothing that changed the content. But each person was able to read their profile and make the appropriate edits. And many people we went back in conversation with just for further clarification.
And when the manuscript went to Schiffer, we were told that there would be very little editing to be done at their end because of the way it had been put together. You can't change people's quotes. Their words are theirs, they belong to them. So they went as they were. If Chotsani and I made some grammar mistakes, that's what they dealt with. But they read them last, and then they got printed. And now they're this book. Where do we go now? Shall we go back to questions?
Sure. Lynn Sack is saying, thank you for stressing the collaboration of all cultures. And then also Lynn is asking, will there be a follow-up on international people of color, of ceramists that are of color internationally? Because that could be a next version.
Well,
Not
folks,
coming from me.
that can make that happen.
Yeah, well, you could be an inspiration to others to write the next book, right? That is wonderful. So thank you, Lynn, for that question. And then Mapo Canord, do you know about the NCA? NCA, a Black organization of artists, stated over 50 years ago that included ceramic artist founders such as Robert Stahl, Bing Davis, and art historian David Driscoll.
I know David Driscoll, Robert Stahl, that's David McDonald's professor. I don't know about the organization, but I'm familiar with the artists.
The artists, yeah.
And historian David Driscoll, and his work at Fisk and
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you for bringing that to our attention. And I don't know if there's, B Bricks is asking if Sid Carpenter is included in the book.
no.
No.
There just wasn't room for everybody.
Well, I'm so glad that there are some.
Schiffer set a limit on the number of people we could include, and we tried to put together a balanced, so that it's not all potters, it's not all sculptors, it's not all elderly people, it's not all young people, and so not everybody gets in.
So tell me about the book a little bit. So you have 20, is it 20 artists?
38.
38. Well, that's a lot of artists. That's a big book. And do you typically in there have like 2 pages, like a spread per artist?
Each
I didn't hear that.
Each artist has 7 images, and the profiles vary. Someone like Nathan Murray's, we talked to him and he really wanted his work to speak more than what he said in the profile. So you'll notice that profile is a little bit shorter, and some are longer. It was really tailored to each artist and what they had to share.
Oh, that's good to know. And then in the chat, we've put the link to Schiffer Books where you can buy the book. And Judy Stavin says, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation and for your incredibly beautiful and important book. And then we have Lynn Sack, thank you for all the time and energy you bring these important artists into a greater community. Please tell us about the clay book. We thank you so much for joining us tonight, and Donald and Chotsani for presenting your work and for collaborating and to bring this to the world of ceramics and collectors. This is really beautiful. And I thank you so very much. If you'd like to learn more, and so many people, Gary Martin is saying, excellent presentation, thank you. And Sherry, thank you, so interesting. And I look forward to getting to see you in person in the near future. It's just great. Also, Susan White says, thank you so much. As an artist and art teacher, I will be using so many of these artists in my curriculum. So thank you for helping shine some light on these wonderfully talented artists.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to revisit it, you can certainly tune in to our YouTube channel that will showcase the lecture if you are a teacher or just want to hear it again. And thank you so very much, Donald and Chotsani and Schiffer Publishing. Super grateful for Schiffer to highlighting craft artists and all sorts of wonderful themes. So check out their collection and keep in touch with Peters Valley. I thank you so much.
Well, and thank you, Peters Valley, for doing this. The goal right from the beginning was to get the work of a group of underrepresented makers before as many eyes as we could. And you just added another level to that.
Thank you.
We and the artists are grateful.
Thank
Echo.
you.
Yes.
Well, that's what we try and do is connect everyone, right? That's our ultimate goal. So thank you so very much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Hello and thank you so much for watching this program. Peters Valley would like to thank its sponsors for making programs like this possible. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Peters Valley's channel to receive more like it in the future.